Now, to put it mildly, if you watch this program every night, you know the world is going to hell in a handbasket, minus the handbasket. There's war all over the place, our food and energy and economic problems having kind of a global impact, and 2.5 men still on television. Now, I told you at the beginning of the program, Barack Obama, if he's elected president, political correctness will be at an all-time high. So what do we do about it? We call on the United Nations. They have figured out how to solve all of these problems and so much more all over the world. Why not invite them here? Well, they're sending a special rapporteur, wish I knew what that was, to look into racism in the good old US of A. The rapporteur is, I guess, like an extra fancy hall monitor who's going to investigate, quote, contemporary forms of racism. Instead of the good old-fashioned kind of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance in a number of American cities. You know what? If he's looking for a list of cities, I think he should start in Chicago and talk to Oprah Winfrey, the richest woman in America. And, of course, then he could head out to Oregon, where Barack Obama likely going to announce his victory as the Democratic nominee for president of the United States. Or he could go right on to Albany and interview the new governor of New York, David Paterson. From there, it's just a quick train ride to Washington, D.C., where he could chat with some current and former high-level federal employees like Colin Powell or Condoleezza Rice or Carlos Gutierrez or Alberto Gonzalez. Then, of course, there's Elaine Chao, you know. Then there's the world of professional sports, Hollywood movies, popular music, you know, where plenty of African Americans are setting new standards of popularity and success. Never mind China, the Middle East, Africa, South America. You know, blame us, like everybody else does. Niall Gardner is the director of the Heritage Foundation's Margaret Thatcher Center for Freedom, and he's an expert on the United Nations. Did you get your doctorate in evil?
I have my doctorate in history, actually.
Okay. All right. Who's coming exactly, Niall?
The UN is sending a fellow called Doudou Diène, who is a Senegalese lawyer. He's a long-time UN bureaucrat, a very politically charged individual who goes around some of the freest societies in the world writing damning reports accusing countries such as Japan, Canada, Switzerland, Denmark, for example, of institutionalized racism. He's going to do the same thing here in the United States. He's here actually for 3 weeks. He'll be touring around 8 major US cities, conducting scores of interviews, and has probably in his mind already written the report, frankly.
Yeah, Doudou has.
Doudou, yes.
Yeah, Doudou. Who's footing the bill for this?
Well, the United States is certainly contributing. Although the US actually currently boycotts the UN Human Rights Council, which is behind this investigation, the United States is still forced to actually subsidize the council through the UN general budget. The United States pays over $5 billion a year into the UN system. We can't control where all that money goes.
Right,
some of this money actually goes into the pot of the Human Rights Council.
Are we going to be paying for his transportation or his security here as taxpayers?
I would imagine the US taxpayer will be footing a great deal of the bill. And certainly I would hope that Congress would investigate exactly how much money is actually being put forward towards funding this so-called investigation into US racism.
Let me ask you this. Maybe it's just me, but I tend to be a cynic. Is it a coincidence that he's going to be here this summer investigating racism? I'm guessing the report may come out around October, or there might be some leaks about how racist we really are.
It's rather interesting timing, and the United Nations has picked, of course, a highly contentious presidential election year in a racially charged environment, it has to be said. And the UN does have, of course, a track record of interfering in US presidential elections. It did so in the last presidential election.
In what way?
Well, the International Atomic Energy Agency, headed by Mohammed El-Baradei, was widely accused of leaking information to the New York Times about some missing explosives in Iraq. And John Kerry used that information as a battering ram, of course, against President Bush at that stage, causing a major political storm.
Yeah, but that was only the UN leaking it to the New York Times. So the New York Times, they don't have an agenda at all.
Not at all. But I would
Again, I go back to Doudou. I'm sorry, you were saying?
I would expect, though, that this report, which is due to be released sometime next year, is going to be heavily leaked in the months ahead of the presidential election.
Yeah.
And it's probably going to be used as a battering ram against certainly the Bush administration and possibly against the Republicans as well.
Well, it's a good thing that we're not racist here. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Niall.